I'm Mark Sponsler, and welcome to the Stormsurf Video Surf Forecast for the week starting Sunday, April 5th. Tonight we'll be discussing jet stream level winds, surface level pressure, significant wave heights, and all the things that go into making surf in the North Pacific Ocean. Let's get to work. Looking at significant wave heights for the South Pacific Ocean, we see a small storm producing 36, 37-foot seas aimed well to the east, and for the most part, well east of the Southern California swell window, targeting only, we'll say, Chile or so and points south of there. But a secondary area seas with 26-foot seas aimed towards Peru and a little bit towards the U.S. coast might result in some swell radiating north. Otherwise, we see nothing of any real interest going on in the greater South Pacific. All right, let's get into the details. As usual, we'll start looking at jet stream level winds. These winds up about 30,000 feet help support the formation of gales, and when they form, help direct their track. We're looking for a trough, and since we're in the southern hemisphere, a trough pushes to the north, unlike the northern hemisphere where it pushes to the south. So what this does is helps create a clockwise circulation here in the trough, in the upper levels of the atmosphere and down at the surface, and that is the hallmark of low pressure. And low pressure, if it's strong enough, generates winds, which generates seas. Seas, as they radiate away from the fetch area, turn into swell. Swell, when it hits your beach, turns into surf. So that's why we're looking at the jet stream, because ultimately it is what drives everything, both aloft and down at the surface. So if you don't have good support in the upper levels, you're not going to get a storm down at the surface. So right now we have not a trough, but a ridge. The jet here is pushing hard to the south. That creates a counterclockwise flow, and that's ends up resulting in high pressure, so no support for storm development there. But here we have a trough, and we know that there is some sort of a gale going on here producing seas, so that's of interest. We'll put this into motion, see what happens, and as you can see, the trough is to be moving to the east pretty quick on Monday. The Southern California swell window ends at about 117 west, so right around here. So by, we'll say, Monday lunchtime or so, the majority of the trough is going to be out of the California swell window, focusing only on Central America and down into South America. And you also notice that this ridge is pushing off to the east, pretty much eliminating support for gale development there. But as we get into maybe Tuesday, Wednesday, there's some hint of maybe for a second there, a trough trying to push under New Zealand, but it quickly fades out. But then another blast of wind energy comes in with winds 170 miles an hour or so, but not lifting to the north very well. Now we're into Friday. But then another bit of energy shows up, mainly, so this is the Tasman Sea. There's New Zealand there's Australia. So mainly pushing up into the Tasman Sea on Saturday morning, and then over the southern tip of New Zealand as we get into Saturday evening, and then into the West Pacific, just hopefully on Sunday morning, being fed by 150, 160 knot winds, offering a little bit of hope there, but the trough quickly pinches off. You see it getting just not as much area here, and it's pretty much gone as we get into late Sunday, early Monday, but then a little bit of a trough, maybe trying to organize here. So what we really want to see is a big trough either under New Zealand or somewhere in here. We're not really seeing it. We're seeing a lot of ridging pattern. That is to be expected if you're moving towards a La Nina pattern. But we'll get into that in the later part of the discussion. Okay, let's go take a look at surface level pressure and surface level wind. So here we are, and as expected, there is this gale with 45 knots south and southwest winds. So given the winds are south, let's see, the Southern California cutoff is right around here. Northern California more over here, about 122 west. But anyway, you can see that there is some fetch. I mean, just this small little area right here aimed almost due north. So perhaps some swell has been generated and radiating north. The bulk of this, we're going to say, is heading towards Mexico, Central America, and even down into Peru and Chile. put this into motion, and there you go. As you get into Monday night, we're down to 30, maybe 35 knot winds aimed to the north. That's only good for like 13-second period swell. So probably not a whole lot of hope there. Continuing out, another little fetch here as we get into Monday, but that'll be out of the swell window. And yet another area back in the central South Pacific. Let's see if, and that does evolve. This is the one we're probably more interested in here. 40 knot winds on Monday night, building to 55 knots over a very small area, and lifting north and growing in coverage as we get into Tuesday. Still in even the Northern California swell window midday Tuesday, and then starting to move into only the Southern California swell window Tuesday night. And look at this. Watch this track from way down here to way up here. Here we go. Boom, boom, boom. And that is what you want. You want to see the storms lifting north with southerly fetch, and that basically acts like a bulldozer pushing everything right in front of it off to the north towards our target, in this case, California. But relative to Hawaii, no indication of anything there. All right, we're moving out. We're into Thursday now. Here's this fetch starting to forecast to move under New Zealand. Tiny little area. 45 knot winds, but notice most of this is aimed, if not out of the west, almost west-northwest. There is this little area here. Maybe that will set something up relative to Hawaii, but probably not for California. And this broader fetch here, this would be great if it was free and clear of New Zealand. This is on Friday, and it sort of barely does. I mean, the Great Circle tracks move something like this right in this area under New Zealand. So maybe some sideband swell, but we're not holding out a whole lot of hope. And then yet another fetch in the Tasman Sea on Saturday, and it pretty much, oh, there we go, little tiny area. What's it do? Actually, this is better than what we saw earlier. Sort of almost falling south, but still, fetch aimed up, maybe good for Hawaii, maybe some swell there, and then fading. All right, let's go take a look and see what what effect these winds have on the ocean surface, and that is by looking at the wave models. So we're going back in time here now. This is Sunday, a week ago. A small gale developed in the central South Pacific here with 29-foot seas, 29.7-foot seas to be exact, and started building while lifting north, 34-foot seas as of Sunday night, and pushing to 35-foot seas and 36-foot, that's like over one tiny little area. We'll call it 35-foot seas on Monday, but lifting northeast pretty well, continuing through the day, and then starting to track east and fade. This has generated swell that is radiating towards California. That swell to arrive the earlier part of the week, and maybe with some decent size. Then a second little pulse is also forecast from this little area here. This is in both the North and Southern California swell window. Seas built to 37 feet on late Tuesday night. This is a week ago. And then pushed out of the California swell window. So a good plume of swell radiating north-northeast into, of course, Peru, Chile, Central America, Mexico, and then eventually up into California. All right, so we'll just play this out just so you can see what has happened since then. A whole lot of nothing, but that's okay. Swell is in the water. We'll take every little bit we can get. All right, and now let's go to the forecast. All right. Now we have this little system racing out of the picture. No swell to result for that, and or minimal swell at best. Another little system forecast on Tuesday, very tiny, lifting northeast with 32, 34-foot seas, and continuing lifting northeast and then out of the California swell window again. So maybe another little hint of swell from that, and then the New Zealand situation. So this looks great, but it's all aimed off to the east. And, you know, even if it came through the Tasman Sea, well, the islands filtered out pretty good. Hawaii gets something from this. The U.S. West Coast, probably not. These systems need to push under New Zealand and then lift off to the northeast. So, as you can see, 40-foot seas pushing under New Zealand and on the Great Circle tracks up into California. But Will it lift northeast? No, it just goes east if at best, then fades. Another system behind it, smashing right into New Zealand. No hope there. And then bits of fetch forecast behind that, but just not really getting any traction. So we'll have to see. It's still a week out. We'll see what the models say. Hopefully, this actually is looking better than it did yesterday. So with some luck, maybe we'll get some swell from that. But if that happened, okay, so let's just play the game. So assume somewhere around right here is when this materializes, we'll say Friday night. So it'll be 10 days from there. So not this coming Friday, but probably the week after that, somewhere in the middle of the week at best. Let's take a quick look at the North Pacific. So there was a little gale that formed. You'll see it right here. There we go. 18, 19-foot seas, 20-foot seas, one little bit of 22-foot seas. And here's Hawaii. This swell arrived last night, and it's already fading. There was this system here off the Kuril Islands, but all its energy, well, we'll go back and take a look here, was aimed due north. Really doubtful any or much of any swell's going to make it. Yeah, maybe some will make it to the U.S. West Coast, but probably be pretty small. And then let's see, we're into Sunday, so let's go look at the forecast now. So here's where we are. Another cutoff low developing north of Hawaii, but 14-foot seas. Wind swell to result. Northerly wind swell for the islands, earlier part of the week. Some 18-foot seas to continue, theoretically, and then that all just vaporizes. I mean, at this point in time, we're not really expecting much, if anything, from the northern hemisphere. It would take America. We're out a week, and we're still not seeing anything. All this is, you want to see at least 25-foot seas, and typically we're pretty snobby and say 30-foot seas. That'll get you 17-second period swell, but we're not even seeing anything in the 20-foot range that would result in like a 13-second period swell. So wind swell's the best potential. For Hawaii, sure, they'll get some wind swell, but no solid swell expected. So let's dig a little deeper. All right, so there is low pressure over Northern California right now. It has produced a good amount of snow, a good amount of rainfall along the coast here, and more is expected as the low moves inland, though it seems like the bulk of it is over for Northern California. Also, that cutoff low northwest of Hawaii. We're looking for wind swell potential, and this is not really fitting the bill. For Hawaii, yes, there you go. 20, 25, almost 30 knot northwest winds aimed right at the islands on Monday. That should make for some wind swell there. For maybe, and there's even more, 30, 35 knot winds, sort of lifting northeast, so you really want these systems to be pushing towards you. California, as we get it, let's go back a little bit here. Yes, so starting Tuesday, high pressure sets up. This is almost like the summertime pressure gradient type situation. And what's interesting is you would think that given how we're in a tendency towards La Nina, that high pressure would just be in control. We'd have raging north winds in the spring, and it's just not happening. I mean, we're in spring. We're not getting the raging north winds. A little bit is forecast here as we get into Wednesday. It was at 20, 25 knot north winds, but even real close to the coast here, this is a low-res model. You can see less wind than that near shore. So maybe some wind swell, but nothing real dramatic. But that's probably okay because southern hemi swell is on its way anyway. So you take, we really don't want to see a bunch of wind and wind swell. And maybe, just eyeballing this, waist high, junky wind swell is probably the best that any of this will produce, maybe a little bit more. So we're into Saturday. Then the gradient starts looking a little bit more serious. Here's your high pressure, lower pressure inland. But we don't have enough heating yet to really fire the gradient up. It's still pretty cool. So that looks more like the typical summer sort of pattern. North wind swell there, and probably north wind swell for Hawaii too. We're into Sunday. We're a week out, and there you go. So by the weekend, wind swell. All right, let's keep going. Precipitation for California. So we got a pretty good soak in here in Northern California. Snow in the mountains. So as of yesterday, there was nothing. And as of I looked an hour ago, I think there was 34 inches of accumulation at Sugar Bowl. Okay. And according to the model, it's supposed to just puke snow all night and into the morning. The forecast was 49 inches, and we already have 33 on the ground. So probably going to make that forecast. Yeah, can't go skiing, can't enjoy any of it, and you certainly don't want to like put your skins on and try to skin up with 30 or 40 inches of fresh on the slopes. That's a sure avalanche issue, but just the same. It's good to we like to keep our eyes on what's going on and sort of make sure the models are syncing up with reality. So tomorrow morning we'll see if there is, in fact, 49 inches on the ground. Anyway, so Monday morning, things should start mellowing out quite a bit. And then as we get into Tuesday, it's pretty much over. Well, rain, though, still for Southern California, even into Wednesday. And then Wednesday night, it finally clears out. And after that, high and dry, high pressure taking control into the weekend. And that probably is it for the season, though you never know. Maybe we'll get lucky. But, take everything you can get. I think we were at 52 to 53% of normal snowfall accumulation before this system hit. So maybe that'll get us up to the 60% mark for the season, and then that'll probably be it. All right, let's move. Oh, and let's take a look at snow forecasts for specific locations. Here's the dashboard for Squaw Valley. 23 inches forecast. Now that is there's already been a bunch of snow. So the total yesterday morning when we did the forecast was a total storm accumulation of 49 inches. So we'll see whether we get there. The other interesting part here is temperatures. So the red is above freezing temperatures. This is the base of Squaw. This is the top of Squaw. So you can see we get our big dump of snow through the 7th. So what's that? By Monday, Tuesday. And then temperatures skyrocket above freezing temperatures the whole way to the top, just plateaued off through the end of the model run. How about wind? Wind already is fading at Squaw. So not that it makes any difference. You can't get up there to do anything about it. Let's go take a look at Kirkwood. Same deal, a bunch of snow overnight, and then we max out with a total of about 27 inches of additional accumulations. Here's the base. Here's the top of Kirkwood. And again, that same issue. Lots of warming. Of course, that'll take that fresh snow, mash it down, settle it in, and maybe somewhere about 5 days after this, you'll be into corn snow. Not sure about the avalanche danger, though. What you do when you get 49 inches of fresh and then all of a sudden the temperatures go way up. Probably not something you probably want to be too close to for a while. And winds dying down there. Let's go take a look at Mammoth. Mammoth, 28 additional inches, and their accumulation, rather than 49, I think the storm total was forecast at 64 inches, so even more concern there. Here's the base, here's the top. Now notice, it is not above freezing the whole way to the top, so there's maybe about a 500-foot interval there where it stays below freezing. Not that really matters, and winds, not really an issue. Let's go take a look long-term. What's going on with the Madden Julian oscillation, and then ultimately, El Nino or La Nina? Let's go see what the tea leaves tell us. So first up, we're going to look for the presence of either the active or the inactive phase of the MJO. And the MJO, Madden Julian oscillation, is a periodic weather oscillation. It travels on the equator from west to east. Takes about 3 to 4 weeks for it to make, for either the active or the inactive phase to make it from the West Pacific to the East Pacific. And when in the active state, it helps transport energy into the jet stream, which ultimately then feeds the storm track, be it the Northern Hemisphere in the winter months or Southern Hemisphere in their winter months, though the correlation is not quite as strong in the Southern Hemisphere. So what we look for, and during the active phase, what it typically does is dampen trade winds, and that's how it imparts energy to the jet stream. So this is data from the TAO buoy array, series of buoys strung across the equator. This is the East Pacific here, West Pacific here. This is the equator, and this is the date line. So this is the East Pacific here. We're just looking at the arrows. You can see winds pretty solid, strong out of the east, trade winds, maybe enhanced trade winds, continuing over the central Pacific and into what we call the Kelvin wave generation area. That is, when the active phase of the MJO moves over the western Pacific, and specifically in this area from 135 west, 5 degrees north and south of the equator, to about 170 west, right here. So in this box, when you have the active phase, it can dampen trades, it can produce it can out and out reverse trade winds, and when it does that, then you know you're getting good energy transport into the jet stream, and also those westerly winds take warm water that's normally here, help create a Kelvin wave. That is a ball of warm water that travels under the equator the whole way across the Pacific, that then erupts off of Ecuador if it's strong enough. And if you get successive Kelvin waves driven by successive active phases of the MJO, that's how you get El Nino. All right, so it is anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year that we're really interested in. Yeah, these are the trades. They're pretty strong over the whole Pacific. But looking here in the East Pacific, you see the arrows are still out of the east. That means the trades are stronger than normal for this time of year. Then they kind of settle down, kind of normal over the Central Pacific. We still see these easterly arrows in the Kelvin wave generation area. So this is telling us we're probably not in the active phase of the MJO. Now this is a 5-day mean, which means it's lagging behind about 3 days what's really going on. But just looking at this, probably say we're not in the active phase, but and if anything, we're maybe still in the inactive phase of the MJO. So no big support for storm development there. Let's continue. A quick look at the past 5 days. All right, so this is 850 millibar vector wind anomalies. A fancy way of saying is the wind stronger out of the east or stronger out of the west than normal. Right, so there's South America, there's the equator right there. Date line right down the middle here. Kelvin wave generation area. That's where we're really interested in, because that's where the energy transport to the jet stream happens, and that's where Kelvin waves are formed. So we see the arrows. They're very tiny, but the blue is another way of looking at it. It's wind stronger than normal out of the east, and this was on the 30th of March, 31st. You see a little bit of westerly anomalies here, but for the most part, easterly anomalies, but getting less defined and more starting to look like westerly anomalies as we get into April 3rd. So it sort of suggests the inactive phase of the MJO fading and maybe, just maybe, getting ready to turn active. So what's the forecast for the next week? All right, so this chart, whole planet on one chart, and it is just the east-west component of the wind. The blues mean the winds are stronger out of the east. The reds and yellows, stronger out of the east. These are stronger out of the west. All right, and so where are we? Well, there's the date line, 180 west. The Pacific Ocean starts about, we'll say 130 east, so roughly right there. Kelvin wave generation area ends 170 west, so right about there. So we'll just go right down from here. Now this is past performance. This up here looks like it was the end of the active phase of the MJO in early March, and then here clearly a big inactive east anomaly pattern, so we'll call that the inactive phase of the MJO. And now the past 2 days we've been starting to get westerly anomalies building, so it looks like maybe the active phase is trying to get going, but very weak, and this is a 1 week forecast, so it's supposed to hold in the Kelvin wave generation area for the next week, but not particularly strong, and probably not doing a whole lot to, one, either produce a Kelvin wave, or two, to push substantial energy into the jet stream to feed the storm track down south. Let's keep digging. All right, so this model goes out 2 weeks, and it's not winds, it's outgoing long wave radiation, fancy word for cloud cover, but you can sort of tell. If you have the blues here, blues are negative anomalies, means less sunlight reflectivity off the ocean surface, so one can assume that's low pressure and cloudiness, the active phase of the MJO. So according to this, the statistic model, active phase of the MJO is over the Kelvin wave generation area. There's Australia, New Guinea, date line right there. So right smack in the middle of the Kelvin wave generation area. Not particularly strong though. And fading 5 days out. Still there on the date line 10 days out. But you can see the inactive phase starting to build over the, we'll call it the maritime continent, easing out into the West Pacific. And inactive phase in control 15 days out. We'll call it 2 weeks. And so this is our window right here. Let's say for the next 8 to 10 days. The dynamic model, a little less optimistic, saying active phase, pretty much dead 5 days from now. Inactive phase, developing and basically stomping on everything 10 days to 2 weeks from now. So a bit of a disparity between the two models. We can drill in a little bit deeper here. So these are called phase diagram charts. It is, assume you are looking down on the North Pole here, and we're going to watch the MJO, or at least see the forecast for the MJO moving from west to east on the equator, like over the Indian Ocean, over the Maritime Continent, over the West Pacific, over the East Pacific, under the United States, across the Atlantic, over North Africa, and back to the Indian Ocean. The heavy dot is where the active phase of the MJO is right now. So in the extreme far West Pacific or the far eastern Maritime Continent, the closer the heavy dot is to this circle here, the weaker it is. So a very weak active phase, and forecast to either stay very weak or get even weaker, or stay very weak and race into over Africa 2 weeks from now. That's per the statistic model. The dynamic model, pretty much saying the same thing. Weak active phase, racing, getting strong over the Atlantic and North Africa, and then 2 weeks from now, back in the Indian Ocean and weak. So neither model really offering any strong positive news. Here's the upper level model. So this is areas favorable for precipitation. Greens are favorable, yellows and oranges not favorable. There is South America, Central America. There's the equator. Date line's roughly here. New Guinea. Okay, so you see the greens here. So right now, this is saying, we're probably in the active phase, but this model runs about a week ahead because this is upper level. This is up at the 200 millibar level, so almost above jet stream level, right? But it's saying active phase in the West Pacific. And you can literally see the active phase make its way across the Pacific and into Central America by the 25th of April. And here comes the inactive phase. It actually looks stronger, building in the West Pacific, say the 20th of April, making its way across the Pacific and into Central America by the 10th of May. And then an even weaker active phase after that, we won't even call it the active phase, just sort of a dead neutral sort of pattern. So when you're in La Nina, it's the inactive phases are stronger, the active phases are weak. When you're in El Nino, it's the other way around. The active phases are stronger, the inactive phases are weak. This sort of suggests that the inactive phase is stronger, and it's been suggesting this for a couple of these runs, a couple of these passes of the active and inactive phase. It seems like the inactive is just, has more staying power to it. It's been producing easterly anomalies, and it seems that it's starting to get a little momentum in that direction as well. So let's go out a little bit further. This model, the CFS model, goes out a month. 850 millibar zonal wind anomalies. Again, fancy words for the east-west component of the wind. The reds are the westerly anomalies. The blues are the easterly anomalies. The easterly anomalies are the inactive phase of the MJO. All right, so where are we? Pacific starts here, we'll say 130 east, and the Kelvin wave generation area ends at 170, and the Pacific on the equator about 80 west. That's where Ecuador is. So but what we're interested in is this swath going up here to about here. Now you can see back in time, this is back in January. Here was the active phase of the MJO. Actually, the black line is the active phase of the MJO. The purple is the low-pass filter, low-pressure bias. But you can just see lots of reds, and there's another active phase of the MJO. Lots of red, lots of westerly anomalies. So that would have been the time for storm production in January. And sure enough, that's when we had our storms. As we started getting into February, you see everything started falling apart, and the storm machine really just died. We were just locked in high pressure here. Then as we got into March, here you go, inactive phase of the MJO. This is this recent easterly anomaly event that just happened. Now that, thank goodness, is wrapping up, and we're getting ready to move into the active phase of the MJO per this model. 2 contour lines, westerly anomalies. That's supposed to hold into about the 18th of April, and then it fades. Then a weak inactive phase after that, but not even as strong as the one we just went through, just pretty much dead neutral wind anomalies. So we'll see. This looks like our last decent active phase of the MJO for probably a while is my guess, but we'll see. And then there's the 3-month CFS model, 850 millibar wind anomalies, but this is a little bit different. Past performance is down here, the forecast is to the top. The Kelvin wave generation area starts right here, goes over to be about here, slides right on up. So here was our 2 active phases of the MJO back in January and February. You can see the pattern got significantly weaker. Here's this latest easterly wind anomaly event. Then here's the forecast looking forward. The good news is that all I see is yellows and oranges, so suggesting weak westerly anomalies. Let's overlay the MJO here. Here you go. All right, so here's our inactive phase of the MJO that's pretty much fading out. Developing active phase right now through about, April 22nd or 23rd. Then supposedly an inactive phase behind that. But notice, westerly anomalies in control. And another weak active phase, weak inactive phase. I mean, the model just, every run, it gets completely confused here. It's still saying these weak westerly anomalies are forecast, but the actual, where's the active and inactive phase of the MJO? It's having a real hard time, and that suggests that the MJO is just going to get exceedingly weak, and that's not good for storm production. I mean, there's no momentum in the atmosphere. We talked about this last week and the week before. Rather weak atmospheric forcing pattern, not a whole lot, so not a lot of energy to promote storm production. All right, let's overlay the low pass filter here. So here's the other thing. You can see why there isn't a lot of momentum in the atmosphere. This solid contour, consider it like a low pressure bias. It's been over the date line for 2 years now. The second contour, it was actually 3 contour lines back in the spring, in the fall. 2 contour lines that faded out March 26th. We're at 1 contour line, which means very, very weak low pressure. And the model has been either showing this completely collapsing, like right in this time frame, or getting considerably weaker. At the same time, we had this dotted contour line here. That's high pressure, and this is over the Indian Ocean. So we've had a blocking high pressure pattern over the Indian Ocean for probably a year now. And notice all the easterly anomalies. This is what fed all the wildfires in Australia and all that. Now this model run has that sort of, it's much weaker, but still continuing into about the June time frame. We saw other runs of the model where had it die off earlier along with the low pressure bias. The other thing to notice, I'm going to take all this off here. Whoops, not that. We don't want that. All right. Notice the westerly wind pattern, you can sort of draw a line that goes like this, and you see it starting to having less coverage and receding to the west. Still in the Kelvin wave generation area, but receding to the west, if not almost looking like it wants to move into the Indian Ocean. That's another definite hallmark sign of La Nina building. Now, this is just one model, and it's just its suggestion, but we'll keep our eyes on this to see whether this actually materializes. All right, so enough MJO discussion. What's going on in the ocean? We're looking for signs of La Nina now. All right, so this is the East Pacific here. This is the West Pacific here. This is data from the TAO buoy array, and these are the actual anchor lines on the buoys strung the whole way across the Pacific Ocean on the equator. The X's are the sensors on those anchor lines. They get temperature data. They beam it up to satellites. It all ends up in Maryland, I think. It gets mashed with a model, and then you get a sort of a profile of what subsurface temperatures look like. 30-degree isotherm is backtracking. At one point, it was over at 180, something like that. It's been steadily receding, meaning there is this sort of suggests that trades are blowing and they're taking warm water and pushing it into the West Pacific. That is a typical sign of a developing La Nina. The 29-degree isotherm holding at about 180. It's been here for a week or two, but it was actually further over to the west. The 28-degree isotherm has been a brick wall for months on 160. It made a little venture to 150 at the surface, but now is backtracking. So no real change there. The 24-degree isotherm still pushing into Ecuador. So what's this mean? Well, actually, let's go look at the anomalies, differences from normal for this time of year. So what do we have? We have this generalized, just a flat pattern of 1 degrees Celsius, so what's that, 1.8 degrees Fahrenheit degrees above normal, covering the entire Pacific. Interesting. So this is actually, we think, a Kelvin wave here, Kelvin wave number 6, that is pushing off to the east. There's actually little pockets here suggesting there's still warm water. I mean, it's not indicating La Nina in the slightest, which is interesting, but it's not a strong Kelvin wave pattern at all. It's just this sort of generalized warm pool just sitting under the equator. All right, let's take a look at another model. Now, this is a little bit starker here. This is just another model using the same data, clearly indicating this Kelvin wave that is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Call it 3 degrees or so in its core, pushing towards Ecuador with a long, 120 east, you're in the maritime continent there, so a lot of warm water still falling off to the east here, suggesting 3 or 4 months of warm water at least. It takes from about here to get into Ecuador, takes about 3 months. So we'll say 3 to 4 months worth of warm water still in the pipe here, unless easterly anomalies somehow just block it off. Now there is this cool pool right here off of Ecuador for the moment. We think that's just the upwelling phase of the Kelvin wave cycle. You get these a Kelvin wave just pushed into Ecuador, then you get a little bit of cooling after that, and then the next Kelvin wave comes in. Sea level anomalies. All right, this is kind of hard to see, but that's South America there. That's Central America, Mexico, the U.S., and New Guinea right there. There's the equator. There's the date line. What are we looking for? This is JSON 3 satellite data. Basically, you strip out all the wave heights, strip out all the wind wave heights, strip out the tides. We're looking for a bump on the ocean surface. We see it right here, but not much of one. Months ago, it was filling this entire area. Now, what's that mean? Warm water expands. Kelvin wave at depth, down 100 meters in the ocean, expands, so it'll make a little bump on the ocean surface. We have the last little bit of that bump right here. It's barely 5 centimeters. And, so this suggests a very, very weak Kelvin wave or a dissipating Kelvin wave pattern at best. Next up, upper ocean heat anomalies. So this is the West Pacific here. This is the East Pacific here. With this chart, it's a historical look back, so you can go back a year. This is Kelvin wave number 4, maybe, and you just see the last of it moving into Ecuador. Then we had 2 stalled Kelvin waves last summer, June, July, August. They never even made it into Ecuador. They just stalled. Then Kelvin wave number 5 here in the September. There were September time frame last year. Strong active phase of the MJO, creating westerly anomalies that took warm water here, started pushing it off to the east. You can see its trail. That was in, we'll say, late August. Finally made it into Ecuador in the December time frame. So that was almost 4 months there. And then here's our next and maybe final Kelvin wave, sort of a mixture of 2 westerly wind bursts here in December, January time frame and in February. That is making its way across. There's that cool pool we saw in the previous chart. Hopefully this will push in here. Looks very much like this one. Should push in and erupt, we'll say another 3 or 4 weeks from now. We'll see what it does, see how strong it is, but also notice after this, look at that line right there. No indication of any warming. See, it was all that pale yellow has been continuous the whole way through, and all of a sudden it's gone. To me, that suggests that maybe this is the end of the Kelvin waves push that's been going on for 2 years now, I think. All right, let's go take a look at the ocean surface and see if we can get some sense of what's going on here. Here's South America. You can see warm water off the coast of, this is Peru, Chile here. Yeah, warm water. It's actually looking pretty good, though there is cool water directly along the coast. Here's Ecuador right here. This is the equator. Cool pool here, and then you can see it again duplicated here. But then warm water all off of Mexico, moving out both north and south of the equator. So this sort of looks like, we've had Kelvin waves erupting, the trades blow, they catch that warm water, start pushing it across the equator. But then we also have this sort of building cool pool off of Peru and Chile here, and almost going out to 140 west. That's filling the entire southeast Pacific. Another one off of the U.S. West Coast and Baja. This is all indicative of high pressure driving upwelling off of here, and same deal here. High pressure circulates the other way in the southern hemisphere, driving upwelling here. So it's sort of a hybrid. In fact, let's continue on our tour. We'll talk more about that. 7-day trend, not a long-term trend, just a week long. But what's going on? Well, you can definitely see whatever warming was happening off here is dissipating. You see cooling building here, cooling building along Peru, coming off of Ecuador. Now, there was a big cool thing going on off of Central America. That has dissipated, thank goodness. And we have warming developing. Mainly, it's just warming relative to what it was, because it was actually quite cold in here. So this is not an out-and-out warming pattern. It's just, less upwelling than there was is probably a better way of indicating it. And then pretty much a neutral pattern beyond that. All right, let's go take a look at the overview. So here's the big pattern. You see warming here, but there's sort of this triangle here of cooling. It actually went out over the Galapagos and out to somewhere in here last week when we were looking at this. So fortunately, it has backed off. We suspect it's backing off because the inactive phase of the MJO is weakening and fading. Active phase trying to build over here. So we got this kind of hybrid thing. This looks like El Nino. You got, hey, there's warm water there, right? But it's not very warm, and it's pretty weak. And you get these occasional stabs of cold water going right through the heart of it. So we're in this. And you see the high pressure forcing off of California. You see the high pressure forcing off of Peru. So we're in a hybrid mode. This looks like El Nino. It looks like the last of El Nino. We know there's one more Kelvin wave trying to make its way across. But at the same time, the atmosphere is kind of going, I want to go to La Nina, is what it looks like. So it's a hybrid state. We're not in either one, and we'll get more data to support that in a minute. But we're moving probably from, and this is remnants of what was a very weak El Nino, and we think we're moving towards a La Nina, and we're starting to see early signs of that now. Sea surface temperatures, this is the Nino 1.2 region. This is the area right there along Peru and Ecuador. Temperatures today, 0.291 centigrade above normal, so a third of a degree, let's say. The trend is kind of noisy in this area. We've been warmer in February and March, but it's starting to fade a little bit. This is probably from that cool finger we were talking about earlier. So, but this isn't the official El Nino monitoring region. This is right here, the Nino 3.4 area. Temperatures today, half a degree, 0.511 above normal. We were up to 0.65 or something like that in March, and had been hovering mainly around 0.4. So according to this, we're still, certainly not neutral. We're warmer than neutral, but not strong enough to be El Nino. You got to be half a degree for 5 consecutive months. We're nowhere close to that. But we are warmer than normal. And so what we're keen on here is not what's happening right now, because we've been in this warmer pattern. And how did that do for our winter? Not a whole lot. I mean, rainfall wasn't good, and snowfall, yeah, we'll eke out maybe 60% of normal. You would think, we thought at least, that looking at all this data, that we'd end up, at a good normal kind of year, both surf-wise and snow-wise. but no such luck. So there's this tendency for La Nina in the atmosphere, we think. I mean, just everything. You look at the ocean, you look at local weather patterns, and you go look at what's happening in Hawaii. They've been inundated by strong trades. I mean, it just all smells of La Nina. It just hasn't really come to the forefront yet because there's this lingering El Nino thing going on. So then let's look at the Southern Oscillation Index. This is a way to gauge the atmosphere. We looked subsurface, right? We looked at the ocean surface. Now we're going to look above the ocean. What's going on there? Okay. Southern Oscillation Index, difference in pressure between Darwin, Australia, and Tahiti. When you have lower pressure over Tahiti, the index goes negative. That's either the sign of the active phase of the MJO or El Nino if it's lasting long enough. If you have lower pressure over Darwin and higher pressure over Tahiti, the index goes positive, and that's sort of a sign of La Nina, or the inactive phase of the MJO. Right, daily contribution today is 0.72. Dead neutral, let's say. But we've been on an 18-day run of negative numbers, which is kind of weird. I mean, so that would suggest that we've been in the active phase of the MJO, but we have not. Another one of these where nothing is correlating. The SOI is saying, oh, you should be in the active phase of the MJO. You look at all the other data, go, sort of looks like we're in the inactive phase. We had easterly anomalies raging pretty good somewhere in this time frame. Anyway, so you go to the 30-day average SOI, that sort of smooths it out. It says we're at minus 6.98. So that would be weekly the active phase of the MJO. We know we're not there yet. We know it's just trying to organize now. Looking back in time, yeah, it's basically been dead neutral. So this for sure says you should be in the active phase of the MJO. We're just starting to get there, and the models are saying, hey, it'll last a week or two, and then it's over. Right, 90-day average SOI. This is your El Nino indicator, minus 3.23. And what has it been? Minus 2, 2.5, 3. So it is unchanged. If you wanted to be in El Nino, this needs to be down at like minus 12 or something like that. So the good news is it's not La Nina. The bad news is it's not El Nino either. It's just in no man's land in between the two. Here's the 30-day moving SOI graphed out so you can sort of see it. Here's where we are today. Diving negative right here. Okay. That's the trend, the 30-day trend. So this is a sign of the supposedly active phase of the MJO developing. All right, and you can see, so the upticks are the inactive phase of the MJO. So you can just see that regular cycle every couple of weeks changing as it goes over the Pacific. All right, and here is all of, let's see, where are we? This last summer, we were looking like El Nino. And then we get into January, and you notice the trend lately is heading upward. Yeah, we have this little downward spike, but I bet you that's all but over and is going to start heading up. And you get the sense there's this upward trend. When you get in positive territory, that's La Nina. Now, you need to be up here at 10 or something. I don't know if we're going to get there, but interesting to see. So let's go look at some models. This is the consensus plume of all the El Nino models, and I think we did this a couple weeks ago, but we're going to do it again. This is the March plume, okay? And what is interesting here, there's 3 models. Sorry, December, January, February. Here's February, March, April, May, March, April, May. You get it. Okay, so it's in 3-month segments, and you can look at, so there's dynamic models and statistical models, okay? And you see, most of them are clustered somewhere around the middle. There's a few of them that kind of maybe weakly suggest some sort of a mild El Nino. But there's 3 of them clustered all down here, all suggesting a pretty solid La Nina pattern developing as we get into May, June, July, August, September, all hovering around minus 1.5 degree temperatures in the Nino 3.4 region, the official El Nino monitoring region. And these models are the NASA GMAO model, the CFS model right here, the NCEP CFS version 2 model, which we use a lot of, and the GFDL model. All pretty solid models, all breaking from the pack, all diving south, suggesting not just any old La Nina, but a pretty strong one as we get into the coming fall. So here's the CFS model, Nino 3.4 sea surface temperature anomalies. Here's where we are today, mildly positive, diving to about minus 1.25 degrees. The good news here is it was down at minus 1.5 or 1.55 even a week ago. So it's backed off a little bit, but still, clear indication, no change from what we've been saying the past couple weeks. Probably a trend towards La Nina this coming fall. So you should probably make the most of what you can get while you can, if you can get it. So the good news is, for the immediate future, looks like there's some southern hemi swell coming. If you can walk or ride your bike to the beach and not contact anyone else, go surf, have a good time, blow off some steam. Don't get in a car and drive miles to go do it, though. Part 2 is, that should last the most part of this week, and then maybe another little southern hemi swell behind that, and then maybe another New Zealand sort of swell if we get lucky developing a week out. So that's not too bad. But then beyond that, kind of hard to tell. Looks like there'll be wind swell. So, if you can't get the southern hemi swell, but you can get the wind swell, take what you can get, right? Make the most of it. But of most importance, stay safe. Don't, go get with a group of people, and don't do anything crazy. It's not worth spreading the virus, especially in California. We've been under quarantine. We were under early. The numbers, believe it or not, I'm following that too, mapping out some of this on my own. And the numbers are actually, damping down. It's not great. We're nowhere near we're not at the peak yet. But the growth rate is not nearly as bad as it is in other parts of the country. So yes, we may be suffering, but part 2 is, do your part, stay inside, don't spread it, and hopefully we'll all get over it sooner. All right, so long term, we think we're moving to La Nina. That's not great news, but, we're not going to sugarcoat it. That's what the models are saying. That's what the atmosphere looks like. So that's what it is. So from here on out, you kind of, if you can get surf, make the most of it, and just be happy you can get something, because La Ninas typically aren't very good. Yeah, you get swells. It doesn't mean nothing happens, but just means storms are short-lived. They don't last as long. They don't get as much purchase on the ocean surface. So the swells they make are real short-lived, and there aren't as many storms. So the frequency of getting decent swells are, less. So that's sort of the unrosy outlook for it. Anyway, if you enjoyed this video, give us a thumbs up, click the thumbs up, subscribe, hit the subscribe button. We'll send you an email notification every time we update this video, or visit stormsurf.com. All the data is sitting there. You can follow all this daily or as often as you like. We follow I follow almost every run of the model. So trying to keep our finger on the pulse of what's going on in the atmosphere. And other than that, we'll do it again next week. Please stay safe. Don't spread the virus. And we will get through this together if we all act as a team. Thank you. See you next week.